In a recent episode we spoke about the infamous imaginary pill study, which was published in 2023 in Nature. The title of the study was "Imaginary Pills and Open Label Placebos Can Reduce Test Anxiety by Means of Placebo Mechanisms." And in this study, 173 medical students who were suffering from test anxiety were randomized to 3 groups. One group received an imaginary pill, which they had to imagine to take once in the morning and once in the evening for 3 weeks. In a second group, the participants received an open label placebo, which meant that they really received a pill, which they had to take once in the morning and once in the evening, but they knew that it was a placebo pill. And in a third group, a control condition, the participants did not receive anything, but still they had a short talk with a therapist in order to make sure that this group also received some attention. And when the scientists analyzed the results, fascinatingly, it turned out that the imaginary pill intervention actually was effective. In comparison to the control group, the anxiety had reduced significantly, and the effects were about medium to large in comparison to the control group. And to put it in perspective, the effect was about half of the effect you usually find in meta-analysis about anxiety disorders, either with medications or with psychotherapy. And if we take into account that this is a quite simple intervention, you just have to imagine to take a pill, these effects are really impressive. So therefore, it's very interesting to take a look at some case studies, because in fact the imaginary pill intervention is not something new. It's been practiced in psychology for decades, and one of the pioneers has been Steve the Shazer, a very influential psychotherapist who was influenced especially by Milton Erickson and Ludwig Wittgenstein, and he developed the so-called solution-focused brief therapy. He was convinced, and now I quote, that problem talk creates problems, solution talk creates solutions. So he was not interested in hours and hours of problem talk about all the problems somebody has, but he was much more interested in solutions. And the faster you could get somebody from the problem trance to the solution trance, the better. So therefore the imaginary pill intervention was something that suited his therapy perfectly. And the first case he describes was the case of a woman in her early 30s who was having trouble to fall asleep. She had been taking sleep pills for already 4 months, but unfortunately she absolutely hated taking the pills because she had difficulty to swallow the pills. And this is something I think many people can relate to. I had the same problem when I was a kid. Somehow all the pills they didn't want to go down my throat, and it was really hard to take the pills. And what she has done to overcome the problem was to crush them into a powder and then mix them into the water. Unfortunately, whoever has done this before knows that if you do so, the resulting drink tastes awful. It's extremely bitter. Of course, depending on the medication, but usually it really tastes extremely bitter. And in order to get rid of this extremely bitter taste, she had to drink several glasses of water, but unfortunately this resulted in severe nighttime urination, which of course completely ruined her sleep and led to more sleep disturbances. So Steve the Shazer, who as I said was influenced by Milton Erickson, the famous hypnotherapist, had the genius idea to offer an hypnosis in which she could craft the, for her, perfect and ideal sleeping pill, which was completely tasteless and perfectly easy to swallow. So maybe a very small but extremely effective pill. But she did not take this imaginary pill just once. No, she was prescribed by Steve the Shazer to use it right before going to sleep. And what was the result? Well, the next time she came to him, she reported that she had slept through the night each night. And the effects were in fact long-lasting, because 6 months later, and now I quote, she still reported sleeping through the night, and she reported only some infrequent need of an imaginary pill. So if you should be struggling with sleep disorders, and maybe you really believe that pills could be the solution, maybe first try this imaginary pill solution. A second case about which Steve the Shazer writes is the case of a woman with severe migraine. She had suffered from her headache for 19 years, and she had tried almost everything and had received so much medications that she called herself a drug addict, but no medication had ever helped, and she was completely desperate and in a very bad condition. With her, Steve the Shazer also conducted the imaginary pill intervention. In hypnosis, he designed with her a pill with all the positive effects of the various headache medications she had received. And again, it was like a wonder, because after taking the imaginary pill for several weeks, she was headache-free and completely happy with the results. The only problem occurred when her doctor told her that, well, your blood pressure is a little bit high and maybe we will have to give you another medication. But after her, as she called it, drug addiction, she no longer wanted to take any medication, and therefore she asked Steve the Shazer for help. And the solution he came up with was to craft and to improve the imaginary pill she already received by changing the color and to give it another positive effect, which was to reduce her blood pressure. And fascinatingly, he reports that sometime later he spoke to her physician and he reported that now her blood pressure was indeed very much improved. After these indeed fascinating success stories, it's also time for a little disclaimer, because of course the imaginary pill intervention does not always work. And this is something what also Steve the Shazer had observed. In some cases it worked wonders and in others it didn't. And probably the intervention is especially effective if people believe that a pill might be the solution for their problems. But for many problems, of course, pills are not the solution. Think, for example, of interpersonal problems. If you just have to talk to something to solve the solution, it doesn't make sense to take a pill. But for some problems, especially when it comes to anxiety or pain, or maybe even depression, an imaginary pill intervention could be quite effective. And as there are no side effects, I think you can give it a try.